All right, Math 10C Prep, welcome to lesson 2.5. Before I get started, I just want to remind you that I am in the Google chat during class time. So when you are watching these lessons, if you are practicing and you get stuck, you need to come and reach out to me, right? I'm there waiting to have a meeting with you. Only a few people have been doing it. Could use a little bit more if you're getting stuck, right? Today, we're going to factor using something called the diamond method. But before we get into that, we're just going to do a little reminder about some multiplication. So let's take a look at a question like this. We have a binomial times a binomial. That's two terms, two terms, times, because there's nothing in between these brackets, so it means times, two terms, one plus a second one. When we have a binomial times a binomial, we're going to do some distribution here. The first term times the first term will become x squared. The first term times the second term becomes plus 4x. Then we have 2 times x is plus 2x. Then we have 2 times 4 is plus 8. After we multiply, we always look for like terms. In this case, we have 4x and 2x could add together to become 6x. Fantastic. So we multiplied two binomials and got one trinomial. If we look at part 2, we're going to do the same thing. X times x will be x squared. X times 5 will come plus 5x. Negative 3 times x becomes minus 3x. Negative 3 times 5 becomes negative 15. Again, we collect like terms. 5x minus 3x would collect to become 2x. So I have x squared plus 2x minus 15. Again, we multiplied two binomials and got a trinomial. Pop up here number 3. We have y plus 1 times y plus 10. We multiply y times y to get y squared. We multiply y times 10 to become plus 10y. 1 times y to become plus 1y. And 1 times 10 to become plus 10. We collect our like terms in the middle. 10y plus 1y is 11y. And again, a trinomial came from two binomials multiplied together. Our last one down here, we now have three things going on. So we have 2 times x plus 5 times x minus 2. When you get this situation, you want to multiply the binomials together first. And then 5 times x is plus 5x. 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. And you want to keep that in a set of brackets, and that 2 just stays out front like that. Again, we can collect like terms. So in the middle, that will become x squared plus 3x minus 10. And then our final step is now to multiply that 2 into everything to give us 2x squared plus 6x minus 20. But again, we see this trend of two binomials turning into a trinomial. Awesome. That's multiplying, right? And hopefully we noticed a little bit of a trend here. All of our answers were trinomials, meaning there was 3 terms. And I got those 3 terms by multiplying two binomials together. What we did yesterday was we started factoring. Factoring is unmultiplying something. And we learned 2 types of factoring. The first type is a greatest common factor. So a greatest common factor, or a GCF, is when you look at an equation and you realize that you could remove a number from that polynomial. So looking at that, I could divide both terms by 2 so that there was now a 2 out front, and I would be left with 2x divided by 2 is x, plus 4 divided by 2 is plus 2. And what I've done is I've taken a polynomial and I've turned it into its original multiplication question. I factored it. That's what factoring is. It's taking something and turning it into multiplication. So if I look at this, I could do a factor again. I could divide both of these things by 3. I could also divide both of them by x because they both have an x in them. That thing I'm dividing by goes out front. It's called your greatest common factor. What you're left with on the inside, 3 divided by 3 cancels out. X squared divided by x leaves me with 1x. Plus 6 divided by 3 is positive 2. X divided by x cancels out. I now have 3x times x plus 2. And I have factored that polynomial by taking out a greatest common factor. Awesome. The second type of factor we learned was that some binomials are something called a difference of squares. A difference means subtraction. Squares means you have things that can be square rooted. I can square root x squared and I can square root 9. This is called a difference of squares. The way you factor it is by square rooting both things. The square root of x squared is x, minus the square root of 9 is 3. And then we learned that you have to write out the second thing with a different symbol in the middle. And these two binomials would actually multiply together to become that original x squared minus 9. It's called a difference of squares. So you square root everything, you do one with a negative symbol, one with a positive symbol. Then we had the really hard questions like this one, where when you get asked to factor it, you have to take out a greatest common factor. So I realize I can take a 2 out of both of these. So there's a 2 out front. These 2's would cancel, leaving me with x squared minus 8 divided by 2 is 4. But after I take out my greatest common factor, what's left in my brackets is a difference of squares. It's a subtraction question, and I can square root both these terms. So you could actually factor this again. The greatest common factor still stays out front, but then I would have x minus 2, because the square root of x squared is x, the square root of 4 is 2, and then the same thing but with a plus symbol in the middle. Like that. So that's the factoring we learned yesterday. All right, let's get into today's new stuff. We are going to try to factor trinomials, meaning that there's now 3 terms. 1 plus a second term plus a third term. This is a trinomial. To be able to factor trinomials, we need to know a couple things. The first thing is that trinomials, they come from 2 binomials. And the reason I know that is look up at our first questions we did today. This trinomial came from 2 binomials. 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 So the first thing we have to recognize is that if I'm factoring a trinomial, my answer is going to be 2 binomials. That's the first thing I need to put in there. I'm like, okay, when I factor this, there's going to be 2 binomials here. The next thing you always need to recognize is that in trinomials, the first term of your trinomial always comes from the first terms being multiplied together. X times x is x squared. Look at the one above. Same thing happens. The first term, x squared, came from the first 2 terms multiplied together, x and x. Look at this question. The first term came from the first 2 terms being multiplied together. Y times y is y squared. Even this one, the first term, the x squared, came from these 2 x's being multiplied together. X times x is x squared. So that means if I want to factor a trinomial, I want to turn this into multiplication, I need to recognize that this first term must have come from these two terms both being x. Because if I multiply them back together, x times x would create x squared. Now, I've got to figure out what goes in them. So what goes with those x's to make them binomials? And the way we're going to figure that out is by doing something called the diamond method. The diamond method is how you're going to figure out what should go in these two blanks. To be able to perform the diamond method, you have to know something called general form. So general form means that when you have a trinomial, like we have here, that trinomial always follows something called general form. I'm just going to move this down a little bit. The general form looks like this. There's a value, which we call a, in front of your x squared. Then there's a value we call b, and that's in front of your x. And there's a value at the end of your trinomial that we call c. So in this question, a would equal 1, b would equal 6, and c would equal 4. To be able to do the diamond method, you need to know those values. The reason why is because your diamond, we're going to put numbers on the points. And the numbers that go on the top will be your A value times your C value on the top and your B value on the bottom. So if I was building this triangle right now for this question, A times C is 4. 1 times 4 is 4. On the bottom of my diamond is the number 6 because it's your B value. To find your side values for your diamond, you try to find two numbers that would multiply to be the top point and add to be the bottom point. So for this question, I want two numbers that multiply to be 4 but add together to be 6. Oh no. That's a typo. That should not be a 6. That should be a 5. So we're going to go back to this question. You need to change this to be a 5. I sincerely apologize for that. That means the bottom of your diamond is a 5. So you need to find two numbers that multiply to be the top number, which is 4, and add to be the bottom number, which is 5. So for instance, 2 and 2 would multiply to be 4, which is good, but it doesn't add to be 5. So 2 and 2 would not work. 4 and 1 multiply to be 4 and add to be 5. That is good. Those numbers on the side of your diamond, those are the numbers that complete your binomial. So the first binomial is x plus 4. The second binomial is x plus 1. And that is how you're going to factor a trinomial. You'll turn it into two binomials by using the diamond method. The first couple times you see a diamond method, it's going to be confusing. So take your time, stick with it, and then you're going to notice the pattern in life is going to be good. All right, I look down here, number 2. We're going to try to factor this. It's a trinomial. Trinomials always come from two binomials. So I know my answer is going to be two binomials. The first terms always come from the first term of your trinomial. So I know the way I could get x squared is if this was x and this was x. They would multiply together to become x squared. The sides of your diamond are what are going to be the second numbers in here. To be able to do your diamond method, you need to put A times C on the top of your diamond and B on the bottom of your diamond. There's another typo in this question. What is going on? This is supposed to be a 3. It should be a 3 on your paper, but it's not on mine. So when I look at this, this is ax squared plus bx plus c. So that means a is 1, c is negative 10. So if I'm drawing out my diamond to factor this, the top of my diamond would be negative 10, because a times c is negative 10. The bottom of your diamond is your b value, which is 3. The sides of your diamond are two numbers that multiply to be negative 10 and add to be 3. Two numbers that would multiply to be negative 10 would be negative 5 or positive 5 and negative 2. Those two numbers multiply to be the top of the diamond, add to be the bottom. These numbers are the second terms in your binomials. And I have successfully taken a trinomial and I've written it as multiplication. So I have factored it. All right, let's try another one. I have a trinomial. When you factor trinomials, you always get two binomials. The first term of your trinomial always comes from your first terms of your binomials. The sides come from the sides of your diamond from your diamond method. On the top of your diamond method is your A value, which is 1, times your C value, which is 21. 1 times 21 is 21. The bottom number is your B value, which would be 10. You're looking to find two numbers that multiply to be 21 and add to be 10. Two numbers that multiply to be 21 would be 7 and 3. 7 and 3 also add to be 10. So the sides of my diamond become my second term in my binomial. My answer is x plus 7, x plus 10. Like that. Wicked. Over here, maybe pause the video. Number 4 is a good one to try on your own, so pause it and see if you can do it. Hopefully you paused it and gave it a shot. So if I want to factor a trinomial, I know my answer should be two binomials. The first term always comes from the first terms. X and x would multiply to become x squared. The second terms always come from the side of my diamond method. Right here and here. Those two numbers have to multiply to be the top and add to be the bottom. The top value is always A times C. A is 1, C is 1, 1 times 1 is 1. The bottom of your diamond is always your B value, which is 2. Two numbers that multiply to be 1 but add to be 2 would be 1 and 1. Therefore, this is x plus 1, x plus 1. And I have successfully taken my trinomial and written it as two binomials times together. I have factored it. If you look at the number 5, the number 5 can be factored with diamond method, but before I factor with diamond method, I need to recognize that I could take out a greatest common factor. And you must always take out a greatest common factor if it's possible. So I need to take a 5 out and then have my trinomial left over. X squared plus 3x plus 2. This can then be factored again. The 5 out front will now just stay out front as a monomial. But that trinomial, I can change that, and I can change it into two binomials. The first term of my trinomial is always the first terms of my binomials. The sides come from my diamond. My diamond is A times C on the top. A is 1, C is 2, 1 times 2 is 2. The bottom number is always B. In this case, it's 3. I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to be 2 and add to be 3. 2 times 1 equals 2. 2 plus 1 equals 3. The sides of my diamond are 2 and 1. I'm just getting those numbers off the top of my head. Like, I just know them. So you're going to have to also practice on just knowing numbers that multiply and then add. It takes a lot of number sense. Perfect. Last question right here. The first thing I do is I recognize I can take a greatest common factor of 3 out of this. When I take that greatest common factor of 3 away, the 3 goes out front, and then I'm left with x squared plus 11x plus 24. This can then be factored again. That 3 will just be a monomial out front, and then I should factor that trinomial to become 2 binomials. The first term in each binomial always comes from the first term, so x times x would be x squared. The sides are the sides from my diamond. The top of my diamond is A times C, which is 24. The bottom of my diamond is 11. The sides are two numbers that multiply to be 24 but add to be 11. 12 and 2 multiply to be 24, so that's good, but they don't add to be 11, so that is not the right answers. If we think of more numbers that multiply to be 24, 8 and 3 multiply to be 24, and they add to be 11. So my answer would be x plus 8, x plus 3. The order in which you write those on the side of your diamond does not matter, just so you know. That is my factored trinomial. It is now written as multiplication. Tomorrow's lesson, diamond method is going to get harder. So make sure you perfect diamond method today. I'm in the classroom waiting to chat with you. Please stop on by if you have a question or need help. All right, take care.